This week, we welcome representatives from Endgame, Red Canary, and a mutual customer, Shawn Smith. It's going to be an awesome segment, and you'll get all the details when we dig into it of how all three of those people came together for this segment. Next, our technical segment, Carlos Perez will talk to us about how to operate offensively against Sysmon. In the security news, Russian hackers use malware that can survive OS reinstalls. The FBI warns companies about hackers increasingly abusing RDP connections. The NSA employee who brought hacking tools home has been sentenced to 66 months in prison. A new Linux kernel bug affecting Red Hat, CentOS, and Debian distributions. And baddies with just one email account unleash phishing hell. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Introducing the new DigiCert. As the leading provider of high-assurance SSL, TLS, and PKI certificates, DigiCert is all about improving security across the web and IoT. DigiCert is committed to helping customers and partners successfully deploy identity, authentication, and encryption solutions. They'll even help you figure out which certificate you need to secure your web domains, apps, devices, and more. Check out the Cert Wizard tool under the SSL tab on digicert.com. Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 577, recorded on September 27th, 2018. I am in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Everyone else is remote this evening. First, I'd like to introduce our illustrious co-hosts. Mr. Carlos Perez is in Puerto Rico, actually, and you are the Director of Attack Research at Trusted. What is your title, Carlos?
I am the principal for research at Trusted Sec.
Oh, that's fancy. You're like principal, like the principal of a school, or no, different kind of principal?
Actually, I'm the practice lead. I think it's the proper title.
Gotcha.
I'm
awesome.
the practice lead on research on everything that is attack simulation at Trusted Sec.
Very cool. Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome.
Hello, Paul. Good to see you again. I have no idea what my title is. That guy at Black Hills InfoSec. No, I think I'm a penetration tester, security analyst, and I don't know, something. Anyway, it's good to be here.
It's good to have you. And you have an announcement. You've got some courses coming up, Joff?
I do. We're having quite a European tour this year with Sec 573, which is the SANS Automating Information Security with Python class. I have just returned from London, which was an amazingly successful teaching experience and great people, and I will be returning to Europe. In the last week of November, I am teaching SANS Stockholm in Sweden, Sec 573, and I'm looking forward to a great group of students. Hope to see people there.
Excellent. Mr. Jason Wood from Paladin Security is here with us. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Paul, and everybody else. Good to be here.
And we're excited that you have you're back in the massage parlor. It's very nice.
Yeah,
very nice.
Got the proper background up again.
It's awesome. Let's see. So there are less announcements, so I'm just going to jump right into it, into our segment, and introduce the panel for this segment. First up is Mike Nichols. Excuse me, no stranger to the Security Weekly Network. Mike is the VP of Product Management at Endgame. Mike, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Yes, nice to have you. Next up is a newcomer to the show. Keith McCammon is the co-founder and chief security officer at Red Canary. Keith, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we've got Shawn Smith. Shawn is the IT security manager at Panhandle Educators Federal Credit Union. Shawn, welcome.
Hey, thank y'all for having me here.
So I want to start because and set the stage and go to each of you to kind of give a little bit of your background and your company. Essentially, there's a partnership formed between Endgame and Red Canary, and we'll get into what that looks like. And Shawn is one of the first customers as a result of this new partnership. So it's very exciting. Our audience has told us they want to hear from practitioners, and this was a great opportunity to incorporate both our sponsors and practitioners from the field in this segment. Mike, I'll start with you. Just give us a little bit about your background and what you're working on today at Endgame, and a little bit about Endgame's kind of strategy in the market today.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be brief on it. But so my background is I'm a cybersecurity defender by trade, Army Intel, moving into a bunch of different SOCs, including DHS SOC, and then I made my way into the sector of vendor sides. So I've been through a few vendors doing network security, behavior security, user behavior security, and now on the endpoint side, running the product team here at Endgame. And we focus here on kind of doing a few things. We try to the world is sort of merging into this converged space where people want to do more with less on the endpoint, right? There's too many agents, there's too much bloat. So we want to, how do we make a lightweight thing that can block the bad stuff, can detect stuff that might be more deeper into the kill chain or the MITRE attack matrix, and then can enable also the threat hunting side as more people are starting to dive into the anomaly analysis. How can we, can provide that rich information, provide those analytics to enable people to do that threat hunting, and that's one of the key parts of the Red Canary side that we want on the partnership. So that's kind of summarizing real quickly. What we try to do is basically the terminology would be sort of EPP or endpoint protections and EDR converged into one endpoint that includes some threat hunting componentry as well.
Fantastic. Keith, from Red Canary, if you give us a little bit about your background and what Red Canary does.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My background is kind of varied. So I started out in like global network infrastructure, and then worked, most of my career spent more on the offensive side, doing work for the government and a few others, and then moved from there over to Red Canary. So our mission at Red Canary, we focus on as a service, an endpoint-based monitoring, detection, and response, right? And really, like our goal is just to achieve like great security outcomes for customers. In particular, doing that through like just using the best technology we can find on the endpoint. That's the partnership with Endgame. But more importantly, like turning that into an operational capability, right? So there's definitely an identified gap between buying and like identifying great tools and being able to turn that into some really good operational outcomes, right? The goal is to find bad things and stop them before they do harm. So that's our mission in a nutshell. I'm sure we'll get into a bunch of the details here soon.
Awesome. And Shawn, how did you get into information security and come to be the IT security manager?
Well, for me, I've been kind of doing IT for about 20 plus years, but 2015 really was the turning point for me to get into IT security. My previous employer, we were a Trend Micro shop, so pretty much I didn't know really more than just the Trend Micro side. I know everybody had other vendors as well, but really just when renewal came up, I wanted to try something different. So I started looking around for what they call the next generation antiviruses, and found Red Canary, and been kind of tracking the Endgame merger, and here today got those two together. Stoked about it.
That's awesome. So Mike and Keith, if you could try and kind of describe how Endgame and Red Canary came to partner. And I know, Keith, you're kind of quoted as saying like great minds think alike. So how did you find each other, and what were some of the commonalities that you had to form that partnership?
Yeah, maybe Keith, if I can jump in first and then follow in. But one of the things that we try to do here in Endgame is make a product that's usable. The kind of the challenge in the endpoint space was that a lot of the tools are sort of expert systems built for experts, and a lot of people were new to security, like you just heard Shawn say, new into the security space, and we wanted to be able to empower them. So we've been focused really heavily on how can we incorporate a product with the right user experience, the right workflows to empower people like that to work. I mean, we get I'm sure you've seen it as well, huge increase in sort of the healthcare reach into this next idea after last year's ransomware problems, kind of reaching in and seeing what's next. And we've have great examples of people like even a registered nurse who spent her whole life doing that, moving in and doing cybersecurity now. But we still were running into situations where there was the one person shop, or maybe the halftime shop, or they're doing IT security or an IT management like Shawn is, but also responsible for security against sort of very advanced techniques and advanced attacks. So we knew we needed to partner with somebody to help us on that. And the beautiful thing about Red Canary is that they sort of see the world in the MITRE view that we do as well. We try to map really tightly to the MITRE attack matrix. We think it's the best sort of non-partial, non-biased, and also the deepest explanation of how an attack works, sort of the non-bullshit way of explaining it, that vendors can't lie because it's very, very detailed. You can't lie about the coverage like you could with a kill chain where you say, oh yeah, we cover execution, you're fine. It's much more detailed. So we were mapping ourselves to that and noticed that, Red Canary sort of also lived in that world. And we know the people there from previous lives, they're extreme experts in the realm of, sort of combing through the proverbial stack of needles to find the needle that matters. And the partnership just made sense. Like you said, we think alike. They're, experts in the space of digging through this data. So empowering them to, we block as much as we can. And for the stuff that might be deeper into the kill chain, empower them to try to find that and provide their intellectual property on top of that data to make people like Shawn happy and protected.
And Keith?
Yeah, I mean, it's Mike did a really good job of summarizing it, right? I mean, we've been, kind of elaborate on the bits that he didn't spend a lot of time on. It's we've got good friends, former colleagues, right? There's definitely a lot of shared lineage between the two companies. So partnership for years has been one of those things that we've always talked about and knew we were going to do, and just had a really great opportunity. Endgame, worked with us for a long time. They built fantastic endpoint product, right? By far the deepest instrumentation we've been able to find on the endpoint, right? And so, the really specific reasons, beyond just personally really wanting to work with those folks, were being able to get access to a different type of endpoint data to enable different types of intelligence, deeper analysis, and obviously preventing as many of these attacks as we possibly can, right? We've been working at Red Canary on endpoint-based threat detection as long as EDR has been on market, right? So we've got a ton of experience with this data, but attack sophistication, right? I mean, is always increasing, and so the best way we found to combat that is just we need access to new data types. We need access to sensors that allow us to instrument endpoints in different ways to go get things when we need to get things. Can't always predict what an attacker is going to do and where they're going to go, right? And so I've just built this really, really unique product, right? A team with just tremendous amount of platform expertise that's going to enable us to do some really, really creative things, not just on the detection side, but also being able to instrument for really clever response, right? I mean, we always talk a lot, and it's easy to focus on how hard detection can become, particularly in a really some really challenging distributed environments. But response isn't any easier, right? As the sophistication of attacks increases, we work a little bit harder to detect them, but for every hour or two you put into detection, when something does slip through, you've got to be really thoughtful about response. You need a really, really robust tool set. So, I mean, just, there's a longer list than that, but I mean, I think that was those are the real tipping points for us, right? And just, their ability to iterate and their willingness to take feedback, not just from us, but from all of their users. And really, to Mike's point, build a product that's usable, not just in the sense that a greater percentage of people can use it, but in the sense that it meets the needs of practitioners, right? And does its best to keep pace. So it's fantastic.
Hey, Keith, how have you integrated the MITRE attack framework being a managed provider? Is that something that you work with all of your customers as kind of a standard, or how do you integrate that into your services?
Yeah, it's funny. So we kind of joke that we have 5 years, almost 5 years of MITRE attack data, which is theoretically impossible. But our platform has always been based on, first is just standardization of the data that we take in, and then doing really, really deep detection within our platform on top of that data. And so for a long time, we had our own taxonomy that we used to describe the things that we saw, right? For two reasons, like one for us, right, as a measure of our own coverage, but also to make it easier to convey to customers the things that we find in their environment, right? So it's really clear to them, whether this is an early stage attack or something that we're concerned has moved beyond. And so when attack came out, right, it was definitely a no-brainer to adopt that taxonomy and to start to use that as a way, again, to common language we all speak to describe the things that we're seeing, but also implementing it as a measure of our own detection coverage, right? Like there's this massive grid of things. There's a subset of that grid that's observable using the technology that we have at our disposal. And then, that's the subset that we work within. And, we're always the job of our cert and detection engineering team is, constantly be looking at that grid, making sure that we have depth of coverage where it's important, and that we're always expanding, coverage overall, right? So, being able to communicate the things you see is obviously a critical use case, but also being able to find a way for the first time to really objectively measure our coverage, right? Which is immensely useful, not just for us, but for customers, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic point. Measuring was obviously more difficult before we had standards and frameworks like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Shawn, over to you. Now, what problem and or challenge did you have that kind of led you to adopting the technologies that were available to you from the partnership between Endgame and Red Canary?
The biggest is going to be on the Endgame side is the in-memory detection. To be able to get a deeper, lower level of shell code and really advanced tactics and techniques and procedures, and have that sent to Red Canary for them to alert me on. I also like the fact that Endgame actually maps back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, especially for their prevention and detection. So those right there were big selling points and highlights that our credit union really could utilize and take advantage of.
And now, Shawn, you're the only person in your organization in the IT security role. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct. And being able to manage everything cloud-based and, if need to, remotely helps out tremendously.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We were talking earlier, Shawn, and there was some data that we've been presenting as a result of some of our other activities and segments on the show. Basically, if you look at when attacks occur, a lot of those attacks, they may test some attacks during the week, but the actual attacks are happening on weekends and holidays when you're likely not at work. I mean, you might be at work some of the time on the weekend, right? Hopefully not, but that's when the attacks are happening, banking on that you're not there. And was that an issue and a challenge that, using Red Canary and having a team behind you helps kind of fill that gap, being the only person, right? You got to take vacation sometimes.
Yep, no, that is definitely a big plus in there because, again, I got a security operations center essentially with Red Canary watching me 24/7. And Red Canary now has come out with a new exec where it's a playbook. What that does is, depending on the detection, I can actually have Red Canary take care of the protection side, ban the hash, kill the process. So that's a nice feature to have as well.
Yeah. No, Mike and Keith, is interesting. We talk about the IT security skills shortage, right? Is that, Mike saying we're trying to make it usable and more usable by more people in the organization, and Red Canary having the MSP services is the same. You're addressing the same problem of that skills shortage, and do you really think there is a skills shortage? And is that a problem you're going after?
Good, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, resoundingly yes on the second question. Is there a skill shortage? Everywhere we go, people can't hire enough people to fill the role to help them out. Part of it's, vendors' problems, right? We've sort of rested on our laurels and had this alert fatigue issue across every possibly from the network side, everywhere else. So pushing vendors to be better and have higher fidelity data to make things more actionable is sort of crucial for all customers to be doing, and helping fight the fight of that problem. Hopefully, we hope we're one of those good guys on that side. But yeah, everywhere we go, they say, look, I love this, even especially when you talk about threat hunting, right? I love this idea of being able to go dig in and proactively and see if there's something in my environment that maybe didn't trigger initial detection, but I don't have the time. Or I can do the preventions, you can block that off, but like with Shawn, like I'm sure he's got a million other things he has to do from the management side. How do I go dig into these alerts to figure out, did I get it all, right? Did I find the root cause analysis? Did I triage the whole incident? And so, we do as much as we can on the product, but we always say we're not going to replace the human. We can't, right? You need that smart person who understands the business, understands the right way to implement the playbooks you talked about earlier, because it's not a one thing stops everything. And that's why partnerships with people like Red Canary is so crucial, because they take the time and they have the expertise to understand the business and understand the right response actions to take place for people like Shawn. And they can recommend that to them. So the product can do as much as we can. And that, the better we are at usability and automation, the better and faster that makes the Red Canary team. So they can do more and cover more threats for people like Shawn. So I think it's a very complementary, where we can do, the automation side is going to get us to do a lot of that initial data. Like we think we can collect what a tier 1 would do. Let's get all the data. Let's enrich it. Let's have it all available. Let's present the picture to the team that says, here's the problem. But then you still need that person to understand how should I remediate this? Because, you need to make sure, maybe I isolate the host. Maybe I kill the process. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just suspend it and I want to get that forensic data, as you mentioned earlier, with some in-memory information. So having that team sitting behind the people like Red Canary that can say, here's the right way to respond to really truly stop that threat has been crucial. And I think complementary to a product like ours.
Keith?
Yeah. And so there's the other dimension of that to that problem is that you can make a pretty compelling argument that the skill shortage is definitely to a large degree it might be our own fault, right? And what I mean by that is for a long time there's been a tendency. Managed services in the grand scheme of things are relatively new, right? There's a broader flavor of managed security service that's been around for a long time, but you're starting to see a lot of new types of services emerge. And you're starting to see larger and larger companies adopt them, right? And I think the big, part of the way that, part of the reason for the skill shortage initially is that, you kind of you take a look at this thing, you sit down, you decide you're going to build a security program. You grab the NIST CSF and you just start marching through it, right? And that's a lot for folks to bite off, right? It really is difficult. And so you end up doing a whole bunch of things. You try to do a lot of things in-house that you might not be ideally suited to do. It doesn't mean you can't do them, but it might take you a year, 3 or 5 years to get there to an acceptable level of maturity. And so the way that we think about helping with the skills shortage problem is, yes, obviously trying to make sure that we do a good job, helping to educate people, grow folks who are new to the industry, to, up to the point that they can, build and run and contribute meaningfully to a program. But the bigger thing is, distinguish before between a product and an operational capability, right? And helping to turn the best products we can find into the best operational capability that we know how to deliver. And in doing that, the key outcome and the thing that's going to help with the skill shortage long term is making sure that customers like Shawn, right, can focus on the things that they are uniquely suited to do, right? Shawn doesn't need to run around trying to figure out how to block commodity malware or even advanced malware and advanced attacks, right? That's Endgame's job, right? They do an outstanding job at that. Shawn also doesn't need to know how to mine through all that data and spend his time EDR's a blessing and a curse, right? It's this massive pile of data that's only as good as you have time to ask it questions, right? Mm-hmm. And so, he also doesn't need to spend his time sitting there trying to imagine questions to ask of it and then looking through the results. As a defender of an enterprise, you should put yourself in the best possible position to respond to things and to do things that are very unique to you. And you should find products and services that do the heavy lifting of all the rest, right? And that's So like a little bit of a different dimension, right? There's obviously like, just building up the workforce in general, but a lot of it, and this is really not unique to security, is just like helping the workforce that you have like do the right things, right? And that's like maybe another way to think about that.
Now, Shawn, many of our listeners and folks that we advise, they come to us with the problem of they have an idea on how to solve a problem in security in their organization, but they have a really tough time selling it to management. So when you found this solution that was formed from this partnership, what were some of the things you did to sell it to your management to get approval to implement this?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Here last year, a lot of our industries in Panama City got hit with ransomware, and I also help with some IT for healthcare as well. So those were real big, hits of ransomware. So I went to the board. We had a board meeting, and I explained to them. And a couple of the board meetings were, some of them are IT savvy, some of them are not. They definitely look at the dollar figure. But I explained to them. I said, "Hey guys, we're a credit union, and we need to do our due diligence to try to protect the member and the member's information and such." And so, to them it was a no-brainer. They looked at it like it's going to cost more in PR if they ever get popped. And not to say it still can't happen, but again, we're doing our due diligence to protect this credit union with the best possible services and products out there. So for them, they see value in that and investing into a security operations center of our own with the best possible endpoint that's sending up telemetry data.
Mike, to you first, and then Keith. When we talk about detecting advanced malware, I think there's many people in our audience, and probably Carlos, who leads an attack simulation team, that are sitting back thinking, I could probably get around this technology. So, Mike, to you first, and then Keith, what do you do to keep up with the advanced attacks and be a leader in that space to detect these more advanced attacks?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that I think people immediately throw shade on, of like, oh, here's a vendor saying they're going to stop attacks. So I'll try to be as in the weeds as I can about this. But basically, the beginning of it starts with your people, right? We're only we like to talk about how we're an elevator asset company, and every night at the end of the day, it's the people that leave the building that are what's valuable here, not the product behind it. And it's really them that's feed it that makes it so powerful. And the team that we came in with, sort of a lot of the same team as Red Canary, had a background in understanding what does advanced attack actually really mean. And malware is one thing, but we think we started really focusing in the beginning on hands-on keyboard type attacks, primarily focused on things that were in-memory based problems, so process injection, privilege escalation attacks, credential theft, things like that were on the border of post-exploitation right after the first initial problem. We sort of backed into then malware and exploitation, and then incorporating MITRE, really have a broad coverage now across sort of all the post-exploitation stages where we can get some good information out of that endpoint side. So some things were just not good to cover with an endpoint, but for the most part, we do as much as we can there. And our main philosophy and our I think our honesty is that we're not going to stop everything, right? There's no way. You can craft a piece of malware that can get around us. You can write an exploit that'll get around us. But because we look as deep as possible across the sort of initial access through all the stages of MITRE, the idea is that every attack will trigger somewhere in that page. And I think it's been bared out when we did an evaluation with MITRE against APT3 that we had numerous different sectors that went green when that attack took place. So in the overall stage of the attack, we're going to catch many of the pieces in which the adversary are doing their job, and that with partnered with somebody like Red Canary that can actually understand how to work on that. Right? We don't. The beauty of them is you don't run into the, it's an old story now, but you run into the target problem where the alert's sitting there, but you don't respond to it, and you end up losing all this information. Red Canary ensures that you prioritize and get to the right problem. With that coverage, with the sort of the belief in the sort of belt and suspenders type approach, where we cover as deep as possible across things, and the ability to have that prioritization, I think that's how we can say successfully or with authority that we will stop these attacks, at least before damage and loss, right? Because as long as the business can say that I didn't have the theft happen, then it's still a success in our book, right? Doesn't mean we stop every piece of malware. Doesn't mean we stop every single exploit. But when the attack takes place, we'll find a way to catch the stages there and alert or stop the problem to protect the business. I mean, that's ultimately what we're here to do is stop, to reduce the risk and protect the business from the problem.
And Keith, I mean, you obviously have a really expert team. What do you do with your team, and what does your team do to stay up on those advanced attacks?
Yeah, so there's, I mean, a lot of it is like a very fundamentals and just data-driven approach, right? So, the reason for working on endpoint data to begin with is just, it gives us the broadest possible visibility, right? Like kind of to Mike's point, there's like tradecraft and tooling and things like that are always evolving, but, there's a finite number of ways that you have to get onto a system. Like something's got to run at least once. Like you've got to get data off, right? And so from a fundamental side, just making sure that we hire and build and continue to grow a team that just understands technology, like the technology we're trying to protect at a really, really low level, right? I mean, one of the things we talk about internally and with customers and like pretty much anybody who will listen, we get a little pedantic about it, right? Is like you can't protect what you don't understand. And so a huge part of that is just keeping on top of the platforms we're trying to defend. And then from there, building a team and just an approach to detection that involves taking in as much data as we possibly can, right? Alerts for us, like we built the company because we believe that like trying to continually find and chase things that like produce higher fidelity alerts was kind of a losing proposition, right? Just show us what happened on the system, use that data, take out as many of those observations as we possibly can, and put them in front of experts and let them make decisions, right? And that has like a couple of advantages. One being that we don't like the platform we've built and the system that we use. It's suppression driven analysis, right? So instead of trying to constantly figure out how to tune the things that we send into our cert and make them more accurate, focus much more on like depth of coverage and build better tools to allow our cert to suppress things that are good, right? And so like the massive advantage there, to directly answer your question, is really just like designing a workflow and a platform that enables us to task our engine to find things that are interesting, not having to worry about whether they're concretely bad. That's our people's job. And like that enables us to operate in an environment where you don't have to know like what a bad thing looks like tomorrow, right? Like there's 1,000 crafty things people will do with PowerShell or Wimic or what have you that haven't been done yet. We'd much rather put ourselves in a position where like we understand how those tools work on the platforms we're trying to defend, and we give our cert really good tools to eliminate things that are good when we see them. And that fundamentally is our approach, right? Again, just like as much data and visibility as we can possibly afford, and then just a really unique workflow that doesn't have a lot of dependencies on prior knowledge, right?
Now, Shawn's sitting here listening to all of this, right? But Shawn, you were somewhat, I mean, skeptical as we all are in security, but you took it upon yourself to test this solution with really good results. What was your process for testing the effectiveness of the solutions from Endgame and Red Canary?
So I tell you, getting into the IT security, my interest now, I'll be honest with you, is getting more offensive, trying to learn, the red teaming, pen testing side of, these advanced attacks. And so, I'll be honest with you, I did use Cobalt Strike and use that to bring in a beacon, phishing, and all that good stuff. And Endgame found definitely the phishing side of it. Now, there are times where I did turn off detection just to see what Red Canary would find on the detection side. And I tell you, both between Endgame and Red Canary, they were alerting within minutes of what was going on. So, I would bring down the defenses just enough to bring in some beaconing attacks and the lateral movements and, privilege escalation, and didn't do any data exfiltration. But again, if you can stop it 9 times out of 10, unless somebody's physically going to come into your building and breach you, if you can stop that malware or, the advanced attacks coming in through phishing or what have you at the very beginning, I think you got a good leg up. And then you got teams like Endgame and Red Canary that are going to give you the reporting that, hey, this is what we saw and this is what they did. And, PowerShell, spawned this craziness out here with this command line, and, command did this or something crazy, like shoot, news.exe, just anything that these people are able to craft and do, which I tip their hats off to the red teamers and the offensive folks. I mean, there's some smart fellas out there and gals too as well.
Now, Shawn, now that you're confident in this solution, what is it freed up for you in time-wise and to work on, right? So now you've got this great protection. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time with your endpoint detection and looking at logs every day on your endpoints. So what has that freed you up to do?
I'm going to be honest with you, it freed me up to try to follow some of the offensive guys to come up with more techniques to keep pushing and doing testing as well. So, that's really where I'm focusing, is really trying to see where I can still break it and get through. And then if I do get through and nothing gets reported, then I can always go back to the two teams and say, hey guys, this is what I did, and I didn't get no alerts on it at all.
And now, Mike and Keith, I would imagine that both of your organizations are very receptive to customers or those in security research positions that are reporting to you ways in which they could potentially bypass defenses and work with the research community.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely love customers like Shawn and even partners like Red Canary too. They are constantly feeding us data. We're in Slack with our partners, and they're digging in and saying, what about from future requests to as Shawn was saying, potential things, gaps of coverage. We love to hear it. It's the more feedback, the better. I hope that people that sort of dig into the competitive landscape here on Endpoint and look at us and the sort of the open source code we contribute back constantly, and sort of the depth we go into on our blog posts, that they see us as that vendor. We try to be a very open vendor, and one that doesn't have the dirty sort of connotation that comes with the vendor word, as compared to some of our competitors that are maybe more of a trade secret type world, or kind of try to market around the fact that there are always challenges, right? We try to be honest and say, yeah, so like I said earlier, something will get through. Things always get through. Let us know what they are, and we'll fix it. We'll update it. And we have a part of our research team here. What they do is they actually, because we have that sort of miter depth behind the scenes, if something were to get through one of the initial protections we have, we can push out a sort of a tradecraft analytic immediately that can then pick that up, using something we call Equal, which we have a big post about. Basically, it's a way to sort of dig into the introspected data that we gather on the endpoint. So we have lots of ways to help our customers out, and we love the feedback. So keep it coming. And he's also a big advocate on Twitter, which we appreciate as well. So yeah, those customers we love. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Keith?
Yeah, and for our part, it's we it's funny. Like, I mean, the research teams and like the folks who lead the research at Red Canary and Endgame, and like there's a long list of others, right? We're like very, very privileged to know and get to work with and share information with like some of like the very best researchers in the world, right? And like a lot of our blog and our approach to information sharing from the day we started the company was like really grounded in the fact that like none of us are like we're only here because we've had the opportunity to learn from some really, really smart people who have been kind enough to share what they know, right? And so sharing that information back whenever we possibly can is like absolutely like a guiding principle, I know, for both of us, right? For all of us. And like on our part too, one of the most interesting things that's probably happened in the last year too, and like probably the most exciting thing, on the research side has been being able to work again with like, folks all over the industry to make new researchers, right? So, like folks like Shawn who are, now have the time and have an interest in going out and doing testing and things like that, being able to, like our Atomic Red Team project, right? Like it's open source. It's sitting out there. It started as kind of like an internal labor of love so that we could test our own detection, enable customers to test us and the tools that we use more effectively. And that thing has kind of grown legs. And now we've got, dozens of like very active contributors, and have kind of like, hopefully put a bunch of people who weren't previously in a position to do really effective testing of their security controls in their program in a position where they can do that now, right? That improves their own security posture. It holds vendors to account, right? Whether you build a product or whether you're like us and you sell a service, right? Making sure that people have just like both the tools to do testing and also understand the importance of it, right? So like that, I don't know, like that research pedigree definitely runs pretty deep, I know, on all sides. And, it's hopefully something that we kind of all work together to continue to expand.
So if there are folks out there in the audience that want to learn more, do they go to Endgame's website? Do they go to Red Canary? Do they go to endgameredcanary.com? Like how do you take advantage of this partnership, Keith or Mike?
You can contact either of us, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're an existing Endgame customer, like are starting to work with some of those. We have obviously some existing Red Canary customers who are interested in working with Endgame now, and so I think we got a pretty good flow set up on both sides. Like if the use cases are pretty clear, right? I think we've gotten pretty good at sorting out who needs help and what type. So whoever you're most comfortable talking to, or whoever's choice of drink you prefer at Derby or wherever you run into us next is where you should absolutely start. So.
Awesome. And now, Mike, will you be at DerbyCon speaking? I know, and Endgame will be there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I will not. But there's a big crew of us that'll be out there. People that are much more intelligent than I am to speak about the what we're building. So definitely come talk to us. We'll most of our, or a good portion of the I think of the response side of the research team will be out there, and then some, definitely come talk to us. We'll go in depth. Like I said, we are more than happy, and I think just to second what Keith said, we're very open about what we're doing and happy to talk about it and talk about in depth. How we do things and how the product operates, and make recommendations on what the right path to go forward with is.
Fantastic. Well, Shawn, Mike, and Keith, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you. I loved having all the different perspectives, from the partnership to the customer engagement, and highlighting some of the benefits, which I think for our audience, my big takeaway is, like, Shawn, you get to do cool stuff now, right? You get to focus on the cooler attacks, and I think that's going to really resonate with our audience. So, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back, and Carlos Perez has a technical segment. So stay tuned.